This week is all about International Women's Day and giving as many women as possible a voice and a chance to share their various experiences with others and to share their insights and views on all things relating to women. I'm delighted today to be joined by Emma Sims of Emma Sims Holistic Therapies, somebody I've worked with over the last 12 months, had the absolute pleasure of working with Emma, and we've got a lot of projects also forthcoming. But Emma is a big advocate of self-care. And I'd like to just have a chat about self-care in the context of women and your experiences, Emma.
Hi, Jan. Thank you for asking me to do this. I think it's interesting. My mind just goes straight away to women, perhaps mothers who struggle to find the time to self-care, and it's becoming more and more popular and acceptable to understand this role that self-care has within our lives, I think. But I'm noticing that alongside that comes that weight of guilt when we do or we don't do something. So, these words are being bandied around, aren't they? Self-care. And people may suddenly think, oh gosh, I don't do that. I feel quite guilty. I don't have the time. I don't know how to do it. Or they may have a complete and utter block with it as well and think, oh, I don't need it. I'm Superwoman. I can do this. I've got this, which is fair enough if you have and your health is good and you're feeling fine within yourself. But if things are not running smoothly, if things are not how you would like them to be, then perhaps it's an opportunity to reflect and find out what you can do just to help yourself. And these can be small things. It can even start with, not judging ourselves, by being kind to ourselves and saying, well, do you know what? Okay, so I'm not doing the best I can right now for myself, self-care wise, but I'm doing the best that I can in the moment. So sometimes we have those ideas, I guess, of what other people think we should be doing, and we take those on board and we think, oh, I should be doing that too. But we've all got our individual journeys and different ways of doing things as well. So perhaps, maybe controversially, I've said before that if a glass of wine is your self-care, to take yourself off down the garden and have a moment with a glass of wine, then so be it. It's not about getting legless. A good glass of wine with red wine with all the antioxidants can be great. And sometimes it can help to take the edge off and to relax. But the concern obviously is that you wouldn't want to become dependent on it. But I can see how so many people, perhaps through lockdown and the isolation, have turned to things like that to help them to cope. And it's not ideal. But I guess if we're hard on ourselves about that, when we know we're doing things that maybe aren't 100%, healthful, then can we not just have a starting point of saying, well, okay, so I'm doing the best I can. Let's try and accept myself for who I am and how I am right now, and know that, changes perhaps at some point in the future, we have set that intention for changes to come in and to allow ourselves to do that in the future, but knowing that right now we're just doing the best that we can. So maybe any number of things, some super women may be able to get up really early and go out and go for a 10K run and have their lives so organised and have support systems in place. But what about those mums who don't? What about those women who don't? What about those many women that at the moment are suffering from mental health problems because of the pandemic?
And I think there's a point there that, there's a real emphasis, I think, on the need for self-care, especially because of what we've gone through in the last year. And even women who normally would have had a good support network have been denied that because they're simply not allowed to access their support network, only to a very limited degree. And that must potentially have a catastrophic effect on self-care.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine so. I think even for those people who have got those support networks, perhaps, you know, sort of living with other people, rather than maybe single people, I think everybody is affected in their own way. And I'm hoping that as we move forward, there will be more ways to encourage people how to foster a sense of greater independence within themselves for self-care, so that they aren't so reliant maybe on other services. Because I think it is our responsibility and it's our duty to ourselves to really learn how to take care of ourselves. However, that again can bring up that sense of guilt, or I'm not good enough, I can't do this, within women who are struggling. And that's understandable too. And again, self-care, I don't think, is about that. It is about finding your own individual personal way through, you know, what works for you, what lights your fire, what, you know, fills your heart with passion and joy, and focusing on those things to try to nourish yourself. So there's aspects I've, as I talk about in my book, and quite freely, you know, when I do talk to other people, my mental health journey has been a huge struggle. It's been very big. So I do understand all the resistance that we may have, the obstacles, the mental obstacles, the feeling of inability to self-care and to do that, and the sense of powerlessness that we feel. And I guess that, coming to International Women's Day, it's that sense of powerlessness that sort of can run throughout women, and taking our power back and saying, actually, there is something that I can do. And when we do take our power back and say, my health is my responsibility, or my whatever is my responsibility, instead of blaming other people as well. Sometimes I think we hand our power over by saying, oh, you know, this isn't good, they've done this, somebody's done that, you know, I can't do this or that. Think about the things that we can do. Take our power back and think about those positive things. What little steps? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with one small step. So what's tiny little thing, what one thing can you do that makes a difference for your day? And the start, I think I was listening recently to a podcast and it said it takes 60 days to embed a new habit. So maybe start with one small thing and do it for 60 days, but it's got to be manageable, it's got to be achievable, something that you can maintain. And so it may seem to you, oh gosh, you know, to sort of like our superwomen brains, that oh, you know, I couldn't possibly choose that, I have to choose something so much harder. Well, why do we set ourselves up for failure? Let's set ourselves up for achieving our goals by choosing one little tiny thing that is achievable, just to build and foster that solid foundation and sense of confidence within ourselves.
It's interesting what you said there, because if we look at the whole sort of movement towards women's empowerment, there's been fantastic work towards that. But do you think there's a risk that this notion of women's empowerment might be putting too much pressure on women, to say that means putting yourself up on a podium as a high-flying career woman, when actually women's empowerment starts with much more fundamental aspects of being yourself?
I guess. And perhaps every situation is different. I think I do really go in on a grassroots level with things, you know, what's going on for the individual as a person. So yes, we can put ourselves under pressure and take too much responsibility at times. Perhaps at those times when we are feeling like, gosh, you know, the weight is on me, that's when we reach out to other people, to professionals, perhaps for help. But ultimately, we do journey alone. We can be in a crowd of people and be on our own in a way. So what can we do to meet ourselves and enrich our own lives and empower ourselves in that way? We don't have to get up on a podium and talk about it. I think the thing about to, you know, sort of to challenge might be that we do this in our own individual way, whatever works for us. It's sowing those seeds of optimism within us that, hey, I can do this, you know, that small achievable goal, I can do that.
And of course, it's important to bear in mind as well that after such a long period in lockdown, it's okay if you need some time to rest and recover before you start aiming higher, isn't it? I think a lot of people will come out of this period, if anything, just find they just need a little bit of time to sort of figure out where they are going rather than just coming out of this, hit the ground running and rush to progress. I think that's something I've seen a lot of people reflect. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's really, really interesting because when we first went into lockdown, I felt very concerned for people who hadn't experienced that sense of institutionalization before. So years ago when I was in hospital, I came out, having had a breakdown, I came out and the world looked really odd, really strange. And I guess it's also like when you haven't been to an area for a long time and you go to a different area and everything looks a bit surreal. So immediately we went into lockdown. My concern was, how is this isolation going to affect people? How are they going to, perhaps those with mental health problems already, anxiety, stress, depression, when they then come out of that, is the world for them going to look surreal? Are they then going to think that that is another symptom of poor mental health and struggle? Instead of, you know, I think it's quite normal, a normal reaction in a way. So I did put out a video about that quite soon on, about those effects, and hopefully more people will speak about that, because I think it's quite an important thing that we don't add layers of discomfort to what is already there as well. But I guess, you know, that's everybody's different journey.
And I think, you know, we're using parenting as an example. I think if you've spent the best part of the last year parenting at home on your own, then it's perfectly reasonable to say, I'm going to have just a little time for myself before I start challenging myself to reach higher, to aim higher, to achieve this or achieve that. It's okay to take a moment to breathe, isn't it? You know,
definitely. It's like the warm up, isn't it? When you go out, you know, doing exercise, warm the muscles up first so that you can effectively, you know, go the long haul. So I think many people are suffering from a difficulty with motivating themselves. And for single parents, you know, homeschooling children must be a very, very difficult challenge. You know, so if people come through this, just a pat on the back for coming through, I think, is enough.
and of course, it's not just homeschooling, it's supporting other vulnerable people, be it young people, older people, and of course, supporting partners as well, because everybody in different ways has struggled at some point during this, haven't they? So there's a lot of way to support other people in different ways. Okay, and how about yourself then? Are there any particular sort of self-care techniques that you personally find are extremely beneficial?
Well, with it being the lead up to the spring equinox, I find that at this time of year, I'm particularly drawn to detoxification. So I find that I naturally start gravitating towards drinking nettle tea. And here's one I prepared earlier as well, not nettle tea, but some wild garlic as well. So out on my run this morning, I picked some wild garlic. And I just absolutely love the sort of purification flavor of the garlic, using that in cooking, in salads. And so I've also been doing quite a lot of dry skin brushing as well, which helps the lymph to circulate and move within the body. I've been taking milk thistle as well, which helps to support the liver. And of course, certainly at this time, zinc, vitamin D, high dose vitamin C as well, to help to support the immune system, as well as good old omega-3 for brain health and cell health. And I've also been having quite a lot more olive oil as well, so using that on salads. And I've noticed that my skin has certainly benefited, because I'm one of those types of people who goes into hibernation in the winter. So I do notice that I get sluggish, I get stuck, my motivation goes, but I tend to accept that as well. I just think, well, you know, I'm in that season, I'm with it. I'm resonating with that season of winter, of stopping. So yeah, as I come out of winter, I start to have more sort of cleansing and purifying herbal teas. I'm also very interested as well that some of us can be really chronically dehydrated. And this is further to what I've said in my book. Interestingly, I went against my intuition in that book. Well, not intuition, but I had a bit of a nudge and I thought, oh, okay, I'll stick to sort of more mainstream thinking. And I'd always believed that every glass of water that we have is beneficial as water by itself. However, once we start adding to it with, you know, tea or fruit juice, anything else requires the body to digest it, so consumes some of the water that is within it. And in that way, perhaps we can become dehydrated. So the course that I'm on at the moment emphasizes this and just brings it back to me that yes, we do need to drink water by itself, you know, 8-10 ounce glasses of water a day to really charge our bodies, because we're 75% water. And so many chronic illnesses such as you know, rheumatoid arthritis, ulcers, so many bad backs, fibromyalgia perhaps, can be a cause, can be affected by dehydration. So it may benefit people if they are in pain to drink more water in that way. So I'm back to that hydration love myself, and reminding myself that of the wonderful analogy that I was taught recently as well, which is of a hanging basket. And when it's been out in the sun for too long and left to dry out, the water just goes straight through it and the body doesn't hold it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been drinking linseed tea recently because that helps to hold the water in the body. I think with personally having years ago been on medications, being an absolute tea addict, I love a builder's cup of tea. So caffeine has helped to dehydrate me over the years. I think I probably have been chronically dehydrated, even though for the last 10 years or more, I have drunk very mindfully. I think I was still dehydrated. So using some of these methods, you know, and researching a bit more about that. If you have a pain condition, I'd certainly advise as a self-care.
Funnily enough, I had a conversation with somebody else quite recently about the topic of hydration, in particular drinking pure water. And something that comes back to me again and again is people saying, well, I love drinking water, but not in winter. And one of the simple ways around that I do myself is I don't drink cold water. I add a little warm water, and just to bring it up. And because some of the attraction of a cup of tea is the comfort.
Yes.
And it's the comfort of having warm drink, but actually just simply drinking warmer water can actually make it a lot more palatable, especially this time of year when you just don't want to be filled with cold liquid, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
But there are many ways to increase your intake, aren't there?
And I think that's a good point about comfort, because what are we seeking for our self-care? So, you know, as women, perhaps it is that that downtime that, oh gosh, you know, I've been so busy running around, because I think women in particular do tend to be doers, and oh, you know, I'll sit down afterwards, I'll do that for myself afterwards, I'll just do the washing, I'll just do this, I'll just do that, I'll just go to work and work, you know, 12-hour day or whatever, instead of saying, right now, I'm going to sit down. And it brings me back to that comfort factor, how every Sunday I used to have croissants, and I couldn't break that habit. And I was, what's that about? And as I explored it further, it was because that time was the only time I was actually giving to purely me. Everybody else had access to me, you know, by phone or whatever. And that croissant time was my time. So, what are we seeking comfort from when we have a cup of tea instead of a glass of water? And can we do anything different? Can we provide that comfort in another way by actually just saying, do you know what? That's it. Put my boundaries up. Everyone else needs to just back off for a minute, and I'm going to give myself 5 minutes and just sit quietly and just be.
I think if you can get into that mindset, you can move away then from the feeling that, well, all this self-care is great, but it's all about going without. It's all about giving up stuff I like.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can get into that change of mindset, it's something you can actually know. This isn't giving up something I like. This is actually embracing something new, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think certainly something that I've struggled with. I absolutely love cake, but I know that ultimately on a very deep health level, it's not great for me. It's the sugar that causes problems, as well as the types of fats. But I think sometimes my philosophy has been add to your diet instead of feeling like you're taking away. So, as I said recently in an article, if you're going to have pizza, if you really feel like you need that, then accept it and enjoy it. But maybe add something. So add salad, have salad with it.
There's also the other aspect, of course, with something like that, is taking the step, taking the dive, and making sure it's something you've created yourself, isn't it? I know you do a lot of various home cooking, and I say home brewing because I'm referring to your kombucha and various other fermented products. Brewing is definitely not the right word, but I think as well, starting to sort of substitute those products in your life, the food products that are more negative, perhaps with healthier versions that you have controlled the ingredients, can play a big part too, can't it?
Yes, I think so, definitely. And I was going to deviate to that on the cake because yes, I do tend to make my own cake if I have it, so that you can control what goes into it, because I love the thought that if your grandma wouldn't recognize the ingredients, then don't put it in your mouth, because all the additives, preservatives that we have, again, our body is going to have to process those and work with those. And if it's not natural to us, what impact is that having? You know, what sort of chemical residues does the liver have to deal with in processing it to eliminate it? So yeah, if we can try and keep our bodies in as natural a state as possible, you know, and even that self-care thing goes to the environment as well, and chemicals that we use in the environment, and you know, household cleaners, breathing in so much recently, obviously with all the hygiene issues. You know, I do question that, because we live in a world where there's many viruses and bacteria around us, and they are actually good for us because they build our resilience naturally. So I do have concerns about the amount of sort of cleanliness that is going on at the moment, you know, and I guess that's each to their own journey as well with that. You know, perhaps there are protocols that we do need to follow professionally, but yeah, it's a big question mark for me.
It's one that's been raised in the past, isn't it? Is like the fact that a hyper sterile environment doesn't necessarily actually help us to build protection. So lots of things, and I think there's still a lot we have to learn in this current journey, isn't there? I think we're at a very early stage of really understanding, you know, the full impact of everything we've been going through for the last, you know, 12, 18 months. And that's not just the physiological impact, but the mental health impact as well. You know, I think there's so much we still need to learn and reflect on and improve on, but hopefully it's an opportunity for us to improve all around. And, you know, hopefully as well, it is an unprecedented, certainly in our lifetime, you know, change to the economy and the entire model of work and life. And I'd like to think that, you know, for women as well, I'd like to think that presents new opportunities as well for women who do want to make changes. So I think whilst it's been a very traumatic period, I think it's also going to shift into a period of opportunity. But I do think laying the right foundations, and if that includes being gentle to yourself and forgiving yourself and just investing in those fundamental elements of self-care, I think that gives you the foundation to really go out there and say, I can achieve whatever I want, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that what you said about the foundations, laying those foundations and the opportunities that are up ahead with that, I do think that although this is difficult and there are very many things that are going on that raise questions for many of us and have caused us to make many changes and lots of difficulty, I do think ultimately that it is a bit of a nudge to humanity, and hopefully we will accept that nudge and make changes in our lives that lead us to more positive, you know, embracing nature. People who haven't been out in nature before have taken that opportunity, and perhaps they will still continue to do that when things get back to, I'm going to say abnormal.
I'm very reluctant to use the phrase "back to normal" because I don't think it's the most constructive way of thinking myself. But I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, whilst we have to respect and acknowledge, you know, the suffering and trauma that has been experienced, I think we also have to look towards the future with optimism because, you know, we're only going forward, aren't we? And we have to build something. Yeah. We have a great opportunity here to build a better world out of all of this. And, you know, I'd like to, and that will be a world that is more centered on self-care.
Yeah, and I do think, definitely. I do think as well that going into the sort of back to the empowerment point about how much fear there is for so many people for different reasons, you know, there's many different buttons that are being pushed on the fear front. To allow ourselves to actually accept the fear and face the fear and acknowledge what we are frightened of, and say, yes, I am frightened of that, and it's okay. It's okay to feel fearful, rather than sort of shoving it under the carpet or pushing it in. Because only when we acknowledge those fears can we tackle and deal with them and grow strong. The more we push that fear in and say, oh no, I'm fine, I'm okay, you know, it just comes across to me as inauthentic, and it's a way of coping, certainly. But I think there's quite a lot of authenticity from that growth where somebody has said, yeah, I'm going to feel the fear and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to take responsibility, because that's the only way that we grow, by saying, yeah, I am walking this path. There's only me that can do it, which is scary, but you can do it. You know, once you empower yourself with those thoughts of, yes, I can, and, you know, use your tools, your resources, your contacts, and ask for help as well if you need it, and make those changes in your life.
I think that is a really powerful message to finish up on. I think that really embraces the spirit of what International Women's Day really is all about. Emma, it's been a pleasure as always to talk to you. I always look forward to our conversations. I look forward to seeing you again in the very near future. In the meantime, thank you ever so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you, Jan. I really enjoy talking to you. I love the spin that you put on things. You know, it makes me think as well. And our chats I find quite inspirational. Thank you.
Thanks again.